Steph Curry has already conquered almost everything in the NBA, but on that cold night in Oakland, he did something that no camera recorded. Upon recognizing the familiar face sleeping on a park bench, the superstar found himself facing a choice that would reveal his true character. What happened next shocked even his security team. The NBA star's reaction, away from cameras and spotlights, exposed a side of Curry that you perhaps didn't know, and raised an uncomfortable question about the invisible world around us. The Chase Center was illuminated on that cold November night in San Francisco. The Golden State Warriors had just won by a comfortable margin, with Steph Curry scoring 38 points. But for the NBA star, the night was just beginning. A charity event for underprivileged children from the Bay Area awaited him after the game, something he insisted on attending, even exhausted after 42 minutes on the court. "Great game, Steph," said one of the event organizers as the 36-year-old athlete entered the hall filled with sponsors, VIP fans, and children with hopeful gazes. For almost 2 hours, Steph took photos, signed autographs, and talked with each child present. His smile never faded. There was something genuinely natural about his generosity that went beyond contractual obligations or building a public image. When the event finally ended, it was past midnight. Curry's security team had already prepared the car to take him home to Atherton, where his wife Isha and their 3 children were waiting. "Actually," said Steph, to the surprise of John, his head of security for almost a decade, "I think I'll take a walk. I need to clear my head." "Boss, that's not a good idea. We're in downtown Oakland now. It's not the time for—" "Just 15 minutes, John," Curry interrupted with that characteristic smile. "You can follow me at a distance. I promise not to do anything stupid." John sighed, knowing that determined expression. Well, when Steph Curry set his mind to something, it was hard to make him change it. The night was colder than Steph expected. As he moved away from the brightness and luxury of the event, the environment around him gradually transformed. The wide streets gave way to narrower alleys, and the well-maintained commercial buildings yielded to older, neglected structures. Even being an NBA star, Steph knew Oakland well, the city that had been the Warriors' home for so long before the move to San Francisco. Turning a corner near Lake Merritt, Steph noticed a small square. It was one of those half-forgotten urban spaces, with some concrete benches and trees planted at regular intervals. Under the dim light of a lamppost, he spotted a figure huddled on one of the benches. Something about that silhouette captured his attention. Normally, he would have continued walking. John always advised him not to interact with strangers on the streets, especially at night. But there was something about that posture, about the way the person was curled up under a thin blanket, that awakened not only his curiosity, but a deep uneasiness. He approached cautiously. It was a middle-aged woman, sleeping in an uncomfortable position, with a small backpack serving as a pillow. Her face was partially hidden by dark hair with some gray strands, but there was something familiar about those features that made him stop. "My God," murmured Steph, feeling his heart race. "Angela?" The woman moved slightly, awakening at the sound of his voice. When her eyes opened, recognition was immediate and simultaneous. Shock and shame crossed her face like a storm. "Mr. Curry," she responded automatically, as if she were back in the office, before the reality of the situation hit her. She sat up quickly and tried to fix her hair, a gesture that broke Steph's heart. It was Angela Hernandez. For 5 years, she had been his personal secretary, organizing his relentless schedule, taking care of travel details, managing fan and press requests. She knew the names of his children, each one's food allergies, remembered birthdays of Curry's extended family. Angela was more than an employee. She was part of the well-oiled machine that allowed Steph Curry, the superstar, to function in the real world. And now she was here, sleeping on a park bench in Oakland. "Angela, what happened?" asked Steph, sitting carefully on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. She looked away, shame evident in every movement. "You shouldn't see me like this," she said almost in a whisper. "Please, go away." Steph observed the details better now. The worn but clean clothes, the organized backpack, the worn-out shoes but carefully tied. Angela had always been meticulous, and even in adversity, that trait persisted. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied firmly. "How long have you been living like this?" Angela took a deep breath, as if calculating the cost of her honesty. "Almost 3 months," she finally admitted. Memories flooded Steph's mind. Angela smiling while delivering a surprise birthday gift to Riley, his oldest daughter. Angela staying late at the office to finalize details for an international trip. Angela gently declining invitations to social events because, as she said, "I prefer to keep things professional, Mr. Curry." In all those years, he realized, he had never really asked about her life outside of work. "Why didn't you reach out to me? Why didn't you ask for help?" He asked, feeling a sudden, heavy guilt. Angela finally looked directly at him, with a dignity that transcended the circumstances. Some people prefer to drown in silence rather than shout for help. At that moment, John and another security guard approached, alarmed to see Steph talking to someone in the dark square. "Everything's fine." Steph raised his hand to stop them. "She's a friend." Taking his phone, he dialed the number he knew by heart. "Isha? I know it's late." "No, I'm fine, but we need to help. It's Angela." 20 minutes later, Steph and Angela were sitting in an almost empty 24-hour diner. The fluorescent atmosphere contrasted drastically with the darkness of the square. Angela wrapped her hands around a cup of hot coffee, as if absorbing not only the warmth, but also the momentary normalcy of the situation. John and the other security guard occupied a distant table, giving them privacy, but maintaining vigilance. Steph had ordered a coffee for himself, but hadn't touched the drink. His eyes were fixed on Angela, trying to reconcile the confident and efficient woman he had known with the fragile person before him. "Are you going to tell me what happened?" he finally asked, keeping his voice soft. Angela took a small sip of coffee, as if buying time to arrange her words. "It's a story you've heard thousands of times. There's nothing special about it." "It is to me," he gently insisted. She sighed deeply. "I worked for you for 5 years. Then I left, for a position at a tech startup, remember? You were even kind enough to give me a recommendation." Steph nodded. He vaguely remembered the moment, the small farewell party at which he had been present for only 30 minutes between training and a photo shoot. The job was good. It paid better, had company shares. She paused. "Then, about 2 years later, I found a lump. Breast cancer, stage 2B. The impact of that revelation hit Steph like a physical punch. Angela had always been the picture of health, always alert, always present. "My God, Angela, I had no idea." "How could you know? Life goes on for all of us." She shrugged, but the casual gesture didn't match the tension in her face. "At first, my insurance covered most of it. But the startup failed during the pandemic. I lost my job and, eventually, the insurance. Cobra was too expensive." Steph knew the American healthcare system and its failures well. As a millionaire athlete, he never had to worry about medical costs, but he knew that for most Americans, a serious illness was also a financial sentence. I used my savings to continue treatment. Then I sold my car. Then I started falling behind on rent, she continued, with a calmness that could only come from acceptance. The landlord was patient for a while, but eventually, well, business is business. Angela, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. Don't be, she replied quickly. I'm not telling you this, so you'll feel sorry for me. It's not pity, corrected Steph. It's concern. You were important to my family. You still are. Those words seemed to break something in Angela. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly tried to contain. I have a daughter, she suddenly revealed. Sophia. She's 16 now. This was completely new information for Steph. In 5 years working with her, he had never known about the existence of a daughter. She's with my sister for now. I couldn't let her live on the streets with me. Angela's voice faltered for the first time. But my sister has her own small apartment, her own problems. It's not a permanent solution. Steph felt a wave of guilt. How could he not have known something so fundamental about someone who had organized his life for years? How many times must Angela have balanced between her daughter's needs and the demands of working with him? Why didn't you reach out to me? I would have helped, you know that. Angela offered a sad smile. Pride is a funny thing, Mr. Curry. When you're falling, it's the last thing you let go of. Steph then understood the emotional cost of that encounter for her. Angela had always been the type of person who solved problems, not created them. Being seen in that situation, especially by a famous and successful former employer, must have been deeply humiliating. Besides, she continued, you know how many people try to exploit celebrities like you every day? I didn't want to be just another sad story asking for money. In that moment, Steph saw something he had never realized before. His entire life, since becoming famous, he had been protected from obsessive fans, from scammers, from the harsh reality that many Americans faced. People like Angela helped build that protective bubble. And now, ironically, that same bubble had prevented him from knowing about her difficulties. How's your health now? He asked, trying to assess the complete gravity of the situation. In remission, at least according to my last checkup 6 months ago. I should have another soon, but... She left the sentence unfinished, the meaning obvious. Where have you been sleeping? Always on that bench? I move around a lot. It's safer that way. Some shelters when I can get a spot, the bench when I can't. Steph tried to imagine Angela, the woman who had organized his global agenda with military precision, now having to plan where to spend the night safely. The disparity was too shocking. I'm going to help you, Angela. Not out of charity, but because it's the right thing to do. No, she said firmly, surprising him. I don't want anyone to know about this, especially in your circle. People who knew me, who worked with me. She shook her head. Promise me this stays between us. Please. Steph hesitated. How could he adequately help her if he had to keep it secret? Angela, some situations go beyond pride. Promise, she insisted, with a flash of the determination he knew so well. Or I'll get up now and walk out that door. And I swear, you'll never find me again. Steph knew it wasn't an empty threat. Angela had always kept her word. All right, he finally agreed. We'll do this your way, for now. His phone vibrated, a message from Aisha. Everything okay? I'm worried. Steph looked at Angela, who seemed simultaneously exhausted and on guard. like someone who hadn't completely lowered her defenses in a long time. "I'm going to take you to a safe place tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll start solving this for real." Angela seemed to want to protest, but fatigue won out. "Just for tonight," she agreed. "And tomorrow I'll go my own way." As they left the diner, Steph knew this wasn't just about helping a former employee. It was about recognizing an uncomfortable truth. How many other Angelas existed in his orbit? How many people who had crossed his path were silently fighting personal tragedies while maintaining a professional smile? "John," he called to his security guard as they got into the car, "we're going to the Four Seasons Hotel, and this doesn't appear in any report, understood?" "Yes, sir," replied John, casting a curious look in the rearview mirror. Beside him, Angela looked out the window at the lights of the city of Oakland, a city that, like her, had multiple faces that few bothered to really know. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains of the Four Seasons Hotel when Steph returned, after spending a few hours at home with his family. He found Angela sitting on the edge of the bed, already dressed in the same clothes from the night before, the small backpack closed beside her, ready to leave, as she had promised. "Were you really going to leave without saying goodbye?" he asked, placing a package on the table. Angela looked up, surprised by his arrival. "I thought it would be easier that way." "I brought some things for you," said Steph, opening the package. "Clean clothes, some personal hygiene products, and this." He held out a new smartphone. "I can't accept," she said automatically. "It's just a tool," he replied pragmatically. "How am I going to keep in touch with you? Throw bottles with messages into the ocean and hope some reach you?" The comment drew a small smile from Angela, the first genuine one since they had reunited. "We need to talk about next steps," continued Steph, sitting in the armchair near the window. "And I want you to meet someone." As if on cue, there was a light knock on the door. Steph opened it, revealing Isha Curry, his wife, holding 2 bags. Angela immediately stood up, professional instinct speaking louder. "Mrs. Curry, I didn't know." "Angela," Isha interrupted her, placing the bags on the floor and approaching for a hug that caught the former secretary completely off guard. "I'm so glad Steph found you." Isha's hug lasted longer than social conventions would normally allow, silently communicating what words couldn't adequately express. When they finally pulled apart, Angela's eyes were moist. "I didn't want to bother you," she murmured. "You have your own lives, your own concerns." "That's exactly why we're here," said Isha, sitting on the edge of the bed and indicating for Angela to join her. "Steph told me about your situation, and I want to propose something." Angela shot an accusatory look at Steph. "You promised." "Isha is my wife," he gently interrupted. "I don't have secrets from her. And besides, I needed her help to come up with a plan that wouldn't hurt your pride." Isha took Angela's hands in hers. "We have a guest house on our property, completely separate from the main house, with an independent entrance. It's basically a small apartment." Angela began shaking her head in denial before Isha even finished speaking. "Please, listen to me," continued Isha. "We're not offering charity. We're offering an opportunity for you to reorganize, a fixed address to look for work, a safe place to receive your daughter. Temporary, on your terms. I can't—" "You can, and you will," interrupted Steph, with the same firmness he used on the court in decisive moments. "Unless you have a better alternative to offer." The silence that followed was answer enough. "Sophia," said Steph softly, "your daughter deserves to have her mother in a safe place. If not for yourself, do it for her. That was the argument against which Angela had no defense. Her face registered the internal conflict, pride fighting against maternal love and pragmatism. It would only be temporary. She finally yielded. Until I can establish myself again? Of course, agreed Isha, squeezing her hands. And nobody but us needs to know. We can say you're helping with a special project, if anyone asks. Angela's eyes filled with tears that she quickly tried to hide. Why are you doing this? There are thousands of homeless people throughout the Bay Area. What makes me special? Steph and Isha exchanged a look. Because you're someone we know, Steph replied simply. And that makes you our responsibility in some way. And because it could have been us, added Isha. Any one of us is just a few personal tragedies away from being in the same situation. Angela discreetly wiped away a tear. Sophia will be so happy. When was the last time you saw her? Asked Isha. 3 weeks, replied Angela, the pain evident in her voice. I try to visit her at school sometimes, but it's complicated. I'll send John to get her today, decided Steph. Unless you'd prefer to go. Personally? Angela looked at her worn clothes. I don't think I'm in any condition. That's why I brought these bags, smiled Isha. Nothing too extravagant, I promise. Just the basics for a new beginning. 3 hours later, a transformed Angela, with clean clothes, arranged hair, and renewed dignity, was sitting in the back seat of Steph's SUV, on the way to the secondary school where Sophia studied. Nervousness radiated from her in almost palpable waves. What if she's ashamed of me? She suddenly asked. Teenagers care so much about what others think. And she'll be relieved to see you well, assured Steph. Trust me, I have children. They're more resilient and understanding than we imagine. When they arrived at the school, Steph stayed in the car to avoid creating a commotion with his presence. Through the tinted glass, he watched Angela waiting anxiously in the yard, checking the clock repeatedly. And then, a young woman with dark hair and features clearly inherited from her mother came out of the main building. There was a moment of hesitation, followed by recognition. Sophia ran toward her mother, throwing herself into her arms with total abandonment. Steph looked away, feeling like an intruder in such an intimate moment. But he couldn't help noticing how Angela finally let her defenses fall completely, embracing her daughter with an intensity that communicated all the love and all the pain of the last few months. Later that day, while showing the guest house to Angela and Sophia, Steph received a call from Marcus, his financial manager. Steph, we need to talk about this situation, said Marcus, disapproval evident in his voice. You barely know these people. How do you know they're not trying to take advantage? First of all, I do know Angela, Steph replied, moving away so the conversation would be private. She worked with me for years. Secondly, do you really think someone would choose to sleep on a park bench as part of an elaborate scam? Desperate people do desperate things. I'm just asking you to be cautious. Steph felt growing irritation. Marcus, if you had seen what I saw, if you had been there in that square… Exactly, insisted Marcus. You're emotionally involved. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe I'm thinking clearly for the first time, retorted Steph. Look, I appreciate your concern, but I've already made my decision. Hanging up the phone, Steph returned to where Isha was showing the small kitchen, to Angela and Sophia. The teenager looked at everything with a mixture of distrust and hope, as if fearing it might disappear at any moment. It was during dinner that night, with the Currys insisting that Angela and Sophia join them in the main house, that Steph realized how tense Angela still was. Every time Riley or Ryan, his daughters, asked an innocent question about where they had lived before or why they were staying in the guest house, Angela became visibly uncomfortable. After dinner, while Sophia was meeting the Curry children and exploring the house with them, Steph pulled Angela aside for a private conversation in the office. "I scheduled an appointment for you tomorrow," he said bluntly. "With Dr. Williams, one of the best oncologists in California." Angela's eyes widened. "Steph, I can't—" "It's just a follow-up consultation," he interrupted her. "We need to know exactly where we stand in terms of your health in order to plan properly." "You don't understand," she insisted. "These consultations, the tests, they cost thousands of dollars. Money isn't a problem. It is for me." Her voice rose slightly before she controlled herself. "It's easy for you to say money isn't a problem, but for the rest of us, money is always the problem." Steph backed off, realizing his mistake. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound insensitive." Angela took a deep breath. "No, I should apologize. I'm unaccustomed to accepting help. It's difficult." "I can imagine," he said, although they both knew he couldn't, not really. "But think about this. If you were in my place, and I in yours, what would you do?" Angela didn't answer immediately, reflecting on the question. "Exactly," continued Steph. "So, please, let me do this." The next morning, as Angela prepared for the medical consultation, Steph had an idea. He called Isha and shared his thoughts. "What if we created a foundation," he proposed, "to help former employees of the sports world who face financial and difficulties? People like Angela, who work behind the scenes, without the financial security that athletes have." Isha considered the idea. "It's brilliant, actually. It transforms a personal situation into something broader, which can help many more people. And maybe," added Steph, "when Angela is ready, she could help run it. She was always incredibly organized and efficient." "First, let's find out how her health is," Isha reminded him prudently. "One step at a time." But fate had other plans. The next night, Steph was awakened by urgent knocking on his door. It was Sophia, in panic. "My mother!" gasped the teenager. "She fainted. I can't wake her up." Steph ran to the guest house with Isha right behind. They found Angela unconscious in the bathroom, pale and with shallow breathing. "Call an ambulance," he ordered Isha, while checking Angela's vital signs. "Sophia, when was the last time your mother took any medication?" She's not taking anything," replied Sophia, tears running down her face. "She said the medicine ran out weeks ago and was too expensive to buy more." Guilt hit Steph like a wave. Why hadn't he asked about this? Why had he assumed that remission meant she was fine? At the hospital, sitting in the waiting room while doctors examined Angela, Steph made a decision. It wasn't just about helping one person. It was about changing a broken system that allowed people like Angela to fall through the cracks. When he was finally able to see Angela, she was awake but weak, connected to monitors and an intravenous drip. "Sorry about the scare," she murmured. "Don't apologize," he replied, holding her hand. "But why didn't you tell me you weren't taking your medication?" "Some battles we need to choose," she replied, "and some losses we need to accept." "Not this time," promised Steph with an intensity that surprised her. "This time, you're not fighting alone." In that moment, watching Angela's tired but determined face, Steph knew their encounter had not been accidental. There was a greater purpose at play, not just for her, but for all the invisible people who kept the world running without ever receiving the recognition or security they deserved. "I promise," he said, gently squeezing her hand, "that I won't abandon you in this difficult time. And together, we'll find a way to transform this experience into something that can help others too." Angela's weak but hopeful smile was the first true light Steph had seen since that night in the dark square of Oakland. The ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel in San Francisco shone with soft, elegant lighting. Sports personalities, celebrities, and Bay Area business people circulated with champagne flutes, chatting animatedly. Discreet signs on the tables announced the first annual gala of the Second Chance Foundation, with the Golden State Warriors logo subtly integrated into the design. In the 6 months since that fateful night in Oakland, much had changed. On the main stage, Steph Curry adjusted the microphone, preparing to give his speech. His eyes scanned the room until finding Angela, elegantly dressed in a navy blue suit, talking with NBA executives. Beside her was Sophia, almost unrecognizable from the frightened teenager of months ago. Now she displayed the confidence of someone who finally had stability in her life. The uniform of the prestigious Menlo School replaced by a dress appropriate for the occasion. "Good evening, everyone," Steph began, and the room quickly fell silent. "I thank each of you for your presence on this special night." He paused, momentarily abandoning the prepared speech. "Many of you have asked me in recent months what inspired the creation of this foundation. The truth is that it was an unexpected encounter that opened my eyes to a reality that was right in front of me, but that I had never really seen." Steph took a deep breath, vividly remembering the image of Angela huddled on that park bench. How to tell that story without exposing someone who valued her privacy so much? "We all know the statistics about homelessness in America," he continued. "But numbers don't tell complete stories. They don't show that many of these people have jobs, have families, have dreams, and they don't show how many of them are just one serious illness away from losing everything." At the back of the room, Steph noticed some journalists frantically taking notes of his words. What he was about to share would certainly make headlines tomorrow. "Recently, I discovered that someone who had worked closely with me for years was living on the streets. A qualified, dedicated person who had lost everything because of medical expenses after a cancer diagnosis." There were murmurs in the hall. Although Steph had been careful not to identify Angela directly, some of those present who knew her story were already making the connection. What shocked me wasn't just her situation, but the fact that I didn't know, that nobody seemed to know. And that made me question, how many other employees, assistants, drivers, security guards, and people who are part of our industry are silently fighting similar problems? Steph made a significant pause, his eyes meeting Angela's briefly. She nodded discreetly, giving him permission to continue. "The Second Chance Foundation is born from that question. Our goal is to create a safety net for those who work behind the scenes in the sports and entertainment world. People who don't have million-dollar contracts or comprehensive health insurance. People who deserve dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances." The applause began spontaneously, growing in intensity. Steph raised his hand, asking for silence. "Tonight, I'm proud to announce that our foundation has already secured more than $15 million in donation commitments, including significant contributions from other NBA athletes, team owners, and partner companies." More applause filled the room. Steph saw tears in Isha's eyes, who was sitting in the front row with their children. But money is only part of the solution. That's why we're also launching 3 specific programs: an emergency medical expenses fund, a temporary housing program, and a professional relocation service specialized in our sector. At the back of the room, Angela absorbed every word with a mixture of pride and disbelief. 6 months ago, she was sleeping on a park bench, hiding from people she knew to avoid shame. Now, she was standing in a gala hall, dressed in a tailored suit, with her daughter by her side. The doctors had managed to stabilize her after that night in the hospital. The cancer hadn't returned, but the side effects of the previous treatment and the lack of maintenance medication had taken their toll. It took weeks until she could stand for extended periods without feeling exhausted. During that time, Steph kept his promise. He never treated her like a charity project, but as a partner in a greater mission. And now, continued Steph on the stage, I have the honor of calling the person who will lead our foundation as executive director. Someone whose organizational competence is matched only by her deep understanding of the mission we have ahead. Please welcome Angela Hernandez. Angela froze momentarily, despite knowing this moment would come. Sophia squeezed her hand, encouraging her. With deliberately firm steps, Angela walked to the stage, received by a wave of applause. Steph briefly hugged her before yielding the microphone. Angela looked at the audience. Famous faces, influential people, many of whom she had known only professionally in her previous life. She took a deep breath and began. When Steph Curry found me that night in Oakland, I had lost almost everything. My home, my savings, much of my dignity, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. But the one thing I hadn't lost was my identity. I was still the same determined person, still a mother, still had valuable skills and knowledge. Angela paused, finding Sophia's gaze among the crowd. What I learned in the last 6 months is that a true second chance isn't just about recovering what was lost. It's about rediscovering your own worth when you're treated with dignity. It's about realizing that your value as a human being isn't tied to your financial situation or your address. The room was in complete silence now, each person absorbing her words. Our foundation won't just distribute checks, although that's important. We'll restore dignity. We'll reconnect talented people with opportunities. And most importantly, we'll create a community where no one needs to face a crisis alone. When Angela finished her speech, the ovation was thunderous. Steph watched with admiration as she gracefully thanked the audience. Anyone seeing Angela at that moment would never imagine that, just a few months ago, she had been among society's invisibles. Later that night, as the gala approached its end, Steph found a moment of tranquility on the hotel terrace. The San Francisco skyline glittered against the night sky, the lights of the Bay Bridge tracing hypnotic patterns on the dark water. "There you are," said Angela, joining him with 2 glasses of water with lemon. "Everyone's looking for you inside." Steph accepted the drink with a smile. "Just needed a minute to process all this. Your speech was amazing, by the way." "Thank you," she replied, leaning against the balustrade beside him. "You know, I still have moments when I wake up in the middle of the night in panic, thinking I'm on that park bench." "Trauma takes time to heal," observed Steph. "Yes," she agreed, "but each day, it gets a little easier to believe this is my reality now." They were silent for a moment, contemplating the city below. "Sophia told me about her acceptance letter," Steph finally mentioned. "Stanford is impressive." Angela's face lit up with maternal pride. "Full scholarship for the pre-med program. I still can't believe it. She always wanted to be a doctor, but I had started to think it was just an impossible dream." "She's brilliant," said Steph, "and determined like her mother." Angela smiled, but soon her expression became serious again. "You know what's strange? Sometimes I catch myself thinking if all this, the foundation, the the work we're doing, would have happened if you hadn't decided to take that walk on that specific night? Steph reflected on the improbable sequence of events that had brought them to this moment. I think some things simply need to happen, he finally replied. Maybe I needed that awakening as much as you needed help. What do you mean? I was living in a bubble, Angela. Sure, I did charity work, showed up at events, donated money. But it was all so distant, so impersonal. I had never really seen the direct impact we can have on a person's life. Angela nodded, understanding. And now? Now I know it's not enough to just throw money at problems from a distance. Sometimes you need to get your hands dirty, make real connections. Through the glass door, they could see Sophia animatedly talking with Riley, Steph's oldest daughter. The two teenagers had developed an unlikely friendship in recent months, despite their drastically different backgrounds. I caught you visiting that shelter last week, Angela mentioned casually. No cameras, no publicity. Steph seemed slightly embarrassed at having been discovered. How did... You know? I have my methods, she smiled. Old secretary habits die hard. I'm trying to meet more people, he admitted. Hear their stories, understand their struggles. Not as Steph Curry, the basketball player, but just as a person who cares. Angela observed him with a new perspective. In all the years working for him, she had always admired his talent and work ethic. But now she saw something deeper, a genuine humanity that transcended his public persona. You know what's the hardest part of being homeless? She suddenly asked. Steph turned to face her, surprised by the question. It's not the cold, or the hunger, or even the fear, she continued. It's the feeling that you've become invisible, that people look through you, as if you don't even exist. Steph nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words. What you did that night, continued Angela, wasn't just offering me help. It was seeing me, really seeing me, when I had become accustomed to being invisible. The moment was interrupted when John, the head of security, appeared at the terrace door. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but the Nike executives are looking for you. Something about that new charity shoe project. Tell them I'll be there in a minute, replied Steph. When John left, Steph turned to Angela. Duty calls. Go ahead, she smiled. I have a foundation to run after all. As they walked back to the ballroom, Steph reflected on how a simple deviation in his routine had triggered such a profound transformation. That night walk in Oakland hadn't just changed Angela's life, it had changed his too, opening his eyes to a dimension of reality that his status and privilege had kept hidden for so long. The next day, while headlines celebrated the launch of the foundation and speculated about the identity of the former homeless employee who had inspired everything, Steph drove alone through a different area of Oakland. He parked near a small shelter run by a local church, away from the cameras, without security guards, without publicity. With a simple cap and sunglasses as his only disguise, he entered the modest building where volunteers served breakfast to dozens of homeless people. Can I help? Asked an elderly lady who coordinated the volunteers. I came to serve breakfast, replied Steph simply. If you need help. The woman didn't recognize him immediately, or if she did, she didn't show it. She just handed him an apron and pointed to the kitchen. We always need extra hands. Welcome to the team. While putting on the apron, Steph noticed a young woman sitting alone in a corner, holding a small child. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of determination and despair, that reminded him of Angela. Taking 2 plates of food, he walked toward her table. May I sit down? He asked kindly. The woman raised her eyes, uncertain. Of course. My name is Steph, he said, placing one of the plates in front of her. "I'm Keisha," she responded hesitantly. "And this is my daughter, Maya." "It's a pleasure to meet you both," Steph smiled. "I'd like to hear a bit about you, if you don't mind sharing." As Keisha began timidly telling her story, Steph listened attentively. For each of the Angelas he could help directly, there were thousands of Keishas, each with her own journey, each deserving to be truly seen. And for Steph Curry, superstar, millionaire, celebrity, the most valuable lesson had been learning to see beyond the surface, to recognize the shared humanity that existed far beyond the television cameras and newspaper headlines. In that simple act of sitting down and listening, he demonstrated who he truly was.